5 more minutes, Caslin groaned. No, now! Kamara stood with her hands on her hips, looking down on her sister as she slipped her head under her pillow. After a moment she reached down, yanking the sheet off. I told you not to stay up all night. Sadist, it's cold. Caslin glared as she threw her pillow at Mara. Anyway, finals were hard. Professor Zarin's was brutal. You breezed through them, especially physics. I knew you couldn't help showing off for her too. So what are you complaining about? Mara didn't let go of the sheet as Lynn rolled on her side, glaring up balefully. Come on, we'll miss breakfast. Besides, we still have the show today, and you can't afford to be late. Caslin sighed and wrenched herself upright on the side of the bed. Remind me why you need me for this. It's barely past 8. Yeah, but the student council is going to be all over this show, and I'll need to jump in on any last-minute problems. Mara reached down, pulling Caslin upright, when she started teetering back towards the mattress. Come on. Having you along will be a help, Lynn. You and that stupid council. Half those bitches are IOTC and you can't stand them. Lynn blew a silver strand of hair out of her eyes, but she was awake now, and Mara reached back and pulled out their Friday outfit. Lynn took the hanger and pulled on her robe so they could head to the shower. Why couldn't you just be in the orchestra? The zephyr isn't an orchestral instrument, Mara shrugged, and adjusted her towel around her shoulders before grabbing her bath kit. Anyway, you wanted to focus on advanced engineering, so I dug into administration, and the context will be good for us down the road. Think of it as a little pain now for a big payoff later. You're better at it than I am. Lynn reached into her closet, digging out her robe, before sticking out a tongue at Mara. The math, too. Maybe, but you're better at engineering and physics. You'd be just as good as I am if you wanted to be. Mara grabbed the door, pulling Lynn along in her wake. Anyway, this gives us time to get breakfast and get over to the visitor center for noon. You could meet this woman on your own, Lynn mumbled, trudging after her sister up the hall. It will be fun. She's a musician and she's been very nice. And it gets you out of having to go straight over to sit around with the orchestra. I suppose. Professor Davari has been a real Grinshaw this whole week. See? Kamara nodded, moving over to look in the mirror and grinned at her sister's reflection beside her. So, matching hair braids and bracelets, or different colours today? Different colours. Caslin ran a hand through her hair. No sense confusing this girl we're meeting, that's just mean. And no bracelets. One last thing before I have to change into my dress for the orchestra. You want the blue or the purple this morning? Mara asked as she took off her robe, hanging it by the shower stall. Blue, it will go with the sashes for the orchestra. Lynn yawned again. Goddess, why did you have to be such a morning person? Cadira glanced at the time on her omnipad before looking back over the gardens outside. 9:30 in the morning and the sun was shining. It was a glorious fall day. A flicker of movement by one of the shrubs caught her eye, and she sighed. Another pouchadillo. Ah well. 2 weeks before the exterminator was free, and the grounds would finally be rid of the revolting vermin. Aside from their nasty temperament, they were prone to spending the evening hours rooting through the garbage and leaving the grounds a mess. What was worse was the way they lived up to their name. Rather than having a pouch for their young, as she'd expected, the vermin could stuff truly nauseating amounts of refuse in their cheeks, carrying it away to gnaw on later. After watching an image of one of the revolting things pull a rancid turok shank out of the garbage, stuff it whole into its mouth and scurry off, she'd made the decision. They had to go. It was just one more detail in the unending litany of requests, requirements, and endless minutiae that came with running the palace. Camaldry had, of course, taken along her steward on the excursion to get her sister's body. And of course, the absence of any other oversight had liberated Cadira to act without prying eyes. But the detail of keeping the palace running were as much a curse as the freedom was a blessing. Still, the necessary work was seen to. Today was the day, after all. In only a few hours, everything would come together. She watched the Pauchadillo slink back into the undergrowth without a trace. For a fleeting moment, she sipped her tea and pondered its imminent extinction before turning her thoughts back to work. How do you commit the perfect murder? The perfect murder does not go unsolved. Unsolved murders get turned over, picked at for months, years, until something turns up. No, the perfect murder isn't one that goes unsolved, but rather one that is solved, with the wrong solution. At least she'd had time to put her contingency into place. Are you sure that's all you want to pack? Miv asked again. I've never seen a man travel so light. Tom shook his head when Mivere sipped her tea and thought it over. I don't think there's anything else to pack. It's just 1 week away, though it would help if you told me where we're going. I don't want to spoil the surprise. Miv gave him a crooked smile, but her eyes twinkled with amusement. It will be nice, and as long as we're off campus by 6 tonight, we can pick up Shalea and make the last shuttle this evening with time to spare. Which is going somewhere warm, Tom smiled. Miv had packed a bag for him. Most of his V-neck t-shirts had been thrown in, along with a swimsuit and 1 or 2 outfits to wear out. It had all been on the revealing side of his wardrobe, what there was of it. I suppose you still want to take me shopping? We can do that when we get there. Miv grinned a bit lecherously at the idea. Anyway, it will give Leah and I a chance to spoil you. And weed out my wardrobe? It could use it. Miv shrugged and looked at him, innocently sipping her tea. All right. I know what I'm beaten. He scowled for the look of it. Jama had a good thing going there, and it might come in handy someday. Anyway, I just need to go by the visitor center at noon, then I'll get changed and meet you before the show at 2. Show's over at 4. Will we be able to get out of here by 6? Mm-hmm. Miv set down her tea and waved a spoon in the air like the classroom's pointer. The show will be over at 4. The social starts at 1, because after the show, the parents usually want to get the girls packed up and head out. Tom settled back into his chair and grinned. I'm really looking forward to seeing you in that kimono. I'm really looking forward to wearing it for you, Miv said, then chuckled. What's funny? Just thinking of Jaxby's face when I showed it to her. I wish I'd seen that, Tom snorted. I expect she's going to be in something pretty special, though. She had me pick over Human and Shilvanti dresses for a solid hour with her a few weeks ago, remember? Has she told you what she chose? No. He thought about it briefly. She seems to like gowns, though, and her house colours are blue and white. I suppose we'll see. Anyway, what time is it? I don't want to be late. It's a little past 10, Miv said, after glancing down at her omnipad. So you're meeting this boy, Aku. I just don't believe it. The Kerbal sisters really don't know they're meeting a boy and a cliff singer? Apprentice, and no, they don't have a clue. He grinned mischievously. Then Belder asked if I could stick around, as her boyfriend and his sister are coming, and Berdine and his son Vadim are going to make it there too, so Melondi asked if I could say hello before the show. She's nervous about Berdine. She should be. His father along on a first date? Miv grimaced sympathetically before finishing off her tea and stretching. She's probably a nervous wreck. Anyway, you don't mind if I tag along? You just want to watch the Kerbal girls when they meet Akarun. He pointed an accusing finger, which Miv ignored with her usual imperturbable grace. Admit it. Well, of course I do, She nodded briefly. But if Hope Klassen is coming, I want to meet her properly, this time. We barely had any time to talk at the conference. If you have to hurry off, I thought I'd spend a little time with her before I go and get changed for the social. Ganya's going to have her hands full. I will, he nodded. Jama's taking on Deshim for the week while we're away, and I want to go over 1 or 2 jobs for the collection for her to poke at, even if she's going to be working with him most of the time. I'll get changed to meet you there. I'm looking forward to seeing you in that suit again, too. Tom thought of the purple and gold leisure suit. There really wasn't any other way to describe the thing. Laying in his bedroom and lied through his teeth. Sure. Can't wait. Miv took her cup to the sink, running it under the tap for a moment. You never did explain how you can tell the Kerbals apart, you know. Oh, it got easier after a while, he shrugged. The first time I just guessed. You what? Miv's face fell open for a moment before she shut it tight. Tom Warwick, those girls have been going crazy for weeks, trying to guess how you figure it out. And you just guessed? Mm-hmm. He arched an eyebrow and grinned crookedly up at her. Isn't it great? Melondi considered the pair of dresses spread out on her bed and tilted her head. She really went above and beyond with these. Jacksme or the tailors? Desie leant her head, looking them over. Black silk draped down to the floor like a river at midnight, and she bit her lip looking at the squared neckline just over the breast, the scoop back, and, thankfully, the long silk shawl in midnight blue they could wear as a wrap. Anyway, it was nice of her, even if she does want to show it off. I know, but her dress is incredible. She's in the same midnight blue as these shawls, and with us both wearing our hair up, we'll look like... What was it he called them? Bookends, Desie supplied, offering over a hairpin before running a hand through her sable bangs, tucking one back. Anyway, a few photos with her in the centre is still going to look amazing, and it's not like I could ever afford this. Hey, we won't be the Kerbal sisters, but with these on and our hair up, we'll be close enough. Melondi looked over at Desie and stepped in beside her before smiling fondly. Thank you. For what? Desie paused to look back at her before biting down on a hairpin. You know, for all of it. Forgiving me for keeping a secret, being a good advisor, Mel teased and smiled fondly. For being a real friend after you found out. You're welcome. And thank you right back. Deshin sighed. At least you belong. If you and Builder hadn't kept my secret, or the professors hadn't put themselves out for me, or any of it, I'd have been tossed out of here. Well, they did, and we didn't, and you aren't. Melondi picked up a pin and tucked her hair back to match Desie's. Ordained by royal decree, you're staying put. Whatever you say, Your Highness. Desie grinned at the mirror. They'd never be twins, but in matching outfits they could pass as sisters. Let's get dressed to meet your boyfriend. I'll try and keep his father busy for a bit. He isn't my boyfriend, Melondi blushed. Well, not yet. It's just a first date. Oh, please. 3 slices of cheesecake? You're never going to let me live that down. Maybe, Desie winked. We're going to look sharp as a pair of new battle cruisers in these, so let's go and blow them away. Arali Tejo, Admiral of the Purple and former Corps Celebre, made her way to the woman taking tickets in at the visitor center. Using an actual person was an extravagance, but she smiled as she offered over the admission chit. Smile and be seen. Everything's normal. It was only 11. Time enough to reach the library and move into position. She looked her very best, and her dress uniform was immaculate. That had never changed. Her pride in every award and decoration shone resplendent on her breastplate, It felt good to get out and be seen again. Or it would have, if she hadn't seen one or two fingers pointing her way. If she hadn't heard a snicker. Soon. It wasn't easy to smile and grit her teeth, but the weight of the blocky pistol beneath her breastplate was reassuring. The human weapon was loathsome. Primitive, with only one safety, but it was the tool for the job. Now that her redemption was at hand, the snicker echoed in her ears like a promise of vindication. The Crown saw her worth, had chosen her. According to the last message, Warwick would be at the library at noon, along with the target. A few minutes' work and all would be right in the world once more. As she waited, she felt her ceremonial dagger slap against her thigh. It was only a tiny thing, barely 12 inches long and less than 2 inches wide, but it would be her salvation, even more than the pistol.
Here you are, Admiral.
The girl running the booth smiled up at her. Probably one of the students.
Enjoy the show.
I will, thank you. Tejo smiled. It's good to be back.
Look, this will be fine.
Kamara looked at her omnipad as she and Lynn reached the visitor center. Thankfully, it was just before noon, and parents still were only showing by a handful here and there.
We'll go in and introduce ourselves. If she's nice, we can show her around the campus and then point out the library. And if she isn't, well, the student council is here. If we need to get away, I can beg off to go help them, and you can get over to the orchestra. So, how do we know her?
Caslin paused as they reached the doors.
I mean, it's not busy yet, but do you even know what she looks like? No idea. She just said she'd be all in white.
Mara shrugged.
Anyway, I can text her if we don't see her inside. We should wait a little while, but I do think she's going to show.
All right, sis. Lynn shook her head and pulled open the doors.
The things you get me into. Oh, right. Who blew up the lab last year?
Mara whispered.
Shh! Seriously?
Lynn wheeled around, her eyes wide as saucers.
We do not mention that.
All right. Mara nodded, looking around through the milling crowd. Parents were starting to come in, and while the real crowd wouldn't arrive until later, there were still clumps of parents around hugging their daughters, standing in the admission line or making conversation.
I don't see anyone. Let me message her.
Lynn nodded, spotting Professor Warwick and Professor Pelavon off to the side. Even with his back turned, you couldn't miss Warwick. Brown hair, tan skin. They were talking to someone just on the other side of... Mara?
Just a second,
Kamara muttered, as she poked at her omnipad.
I'm trying to decide on a message. I want to be nice. Mara?
Lynn reached out and shook her arm. Looking up, she followed her sister's gaze. Lynn slowly canted her head to the right, trying to peer around Warwick. He's in white? Mara slowly leaned her head to the left. He? No. She looked back at her sister and shook her head in denial.
No! We're dressed like this? No!
Would you calm down? Lynn hissed, canting her head a bit more.
We're dressed like every other student here.
That's the problem, Kamara sputtered.
I mean, you don't think that... He's a cliff singer. That's a white initiate's tunic. You don't think I know that? Lynn whispered. You said she was just a musician. You got me into this. Fine. Left side or right? Right.
As Kamara slipped closer, she felt Lynn's hand squeeze hers. Close enough. The pair tilted their heads to the right and counted to 3.
Hi, Professor.
Warwick turned, and for a moment Mara thought he looked entirely too pleased. Kamara? Caslin? I believe your guest has arrived. Warwick turned back and stepped fully out of the way. Ladies, May I present Akarun Dorskulo?
How does he know? This couldn't be happening. No, this didn't... Oh, goddess, the council girls were watching.
Mara squeezed Lynn's hand, hoping she'd say something, but Lynn squeezed right back.
Oh, goddess, this can't be... It's a great pleasure to meet you both,
Akarun said, easily. Mara shivered. His voice was rich and ran over her senses like dark chocolate.
Which one of you is Math Girl? That would be me. I'm Kamara. This is Physics Girl.
Mara bobbed her head and tried not to wheeze as Lynn's nails bit into her hand.
Caslin. I meant Caslin. We're, very pleased to meet you, Lynn smiled,
as her hand tightened on Mara's. Mara thought she was going to faint as Aku reached out and offered his fist. All around the room, girls were definitely staring, and to think she'd wanted a little attention.
Oh, sweet goddess, if this is a test, I fear I may fail.
Vadim glanced at the door to the visitor center, and the cravat, which had looked so fine in the mirror, suddenly felt tight. The drive onto the campus had been more than he'd expected. Not just large grounds, there were signs of age and wealth everywhere. No expense was spared, and everything was as immaculate as a table awaiting a guest. He didn't belong in this kind of crowd. Of course, they did look resplendent, in matching shirts the green of new leaves, with the gold silk cravats. Both wore pants in fine periwinkle, but while Vadim's jacket was the same shade as a fine summer sky, his father wore a jacket so black that light practically fell into it. Vadim had insisted Vadim would be the one to shine, and he did. It was an unusual feeling, and as Vadim reached for the door, he stopped and looked thoughtfully at his father.
Dad?
Vadim, we're here. Remember what I told you. Vadim smiled softly, before flouncing ever so slyly. We're here, and we belong here. We're guests, expected, invited. Our presence is requested. Now, whatever you do, don't hang around out here. You look like a tease. Although the knot in his throat was still there, Vadim smiled. All was right and normal in the world, and he reached for the door and followed his father inside. Thank the goddess. It was warmer too. Now then, where? Ah, Thomas! Vadim waved after spotting Warwick and was already sashaying over to his friend. Vadim did his best to keep up and remembered to put some sway in his step. There was already a small crowd that he mostly recognized. Mandi was there with her friend Desie. Normally, he would have stayed a half step behind father, but on the cab ride over, Dad wasn't having any of it. Vadim, you know this girl. You like this girl. It's time for you to walk in front. Today it's your position.
On a first date? Dad, I don't want that position.
You'll learn to love all positions. Just remember to be fabulous. Mandi looked well, he'd never seen anything like it. Her dress shimmered like liquid ebony, matching her eyes and her hair. Words failed. He didn't know what to say. Conversation was going on all around them, so he stepped closer.
You wore my gift.
Mandi looked at him like he was special. It's fabulous, he smiled. R'hllor leaned over and whispered in Nesta's ear.
So, those are your professors?
Nesta looked around before following R'hllor's glance.
Oh, 2 of them. Why? I've never actually seen a human before. Averton's on the far side of the Imperium from Earth.
Peering at Warwick for a moment, he shook his head.
He's so big. He won't gore you. No tusks, Nesta grinned. Do you want to meet him? Oh, I don't know. They all look busy.
R'hllor shrank a little closer to Nesta.
I don't want to intrude. It's all right. Most of them are my friends, and that's Melondi's date.
Nesper took his hand.
Come on. Pris will find us as soon as she gets here. Hey, Lark. What's going on?
Kellark hit send on her underpad and smiled as Seth edged through the crowd and bumped fists.
Hi, Seth. Just sending off some footage of visitors coming in for the show. I'm going to use it for part of the vlog story when we get back from break. Hey, don't you need to get ready soon? I have a little time. The diving costumes are easy compared to the others, though I'm nervous about my family watching. Oh, come on.
Lark grinned and leaned in, whispering.
It's not like the bikini pictures, is it? Oh, goddess, no. It's the dive.
Seth shook her head and shrugged.
100-foot jump through 3 rings of fire? I mean, they're holographic, but I'll be so embarrassed if I miss. That's what you're worried about? Only you. And I'll bet my last chocolate bar you aren't going to miss.
Lark snorted and shook her head.
So, you're waiting on your family? I was, but I just got a message that they're running late.
Seth pocketed her underpad and nodded across the room.
I thought I'd go say hi to the professors. Want to come?
Lark smiled. She'd gotten plenty of footage of Warwick that she could use for her documentary, since she'd missed the preterm night. It was nothing special, but showing him meeting everyday people just confirmed what she thought. For all the hype about humans, Warwick had an interesting perspective, but he was pretty normal.
Sure. Why not? There they are, sis.
Liam tugged Hope along as he spotted Belder inside. She was peering out the window, keeping watch, and waved excitedly before making for the door.
Damn, this place is big.
This is just the visitor center. You gotta want to see the whole place, right?
Yes, it's big,
Hope said neutrally, keeping to Liam's side rather than allowing herself to look like she was getting pulled along in his wake. Liam's height had enough parents staring as it was, and she kept her head down to focus on the entry.
Sorgo is big enough anyway.
It's not a competition, sis, he said, shaking his head. You said you'd try and have some fun.
We had a cab ride, Liam, she said, as they stepped inside. It was just getting to be decent weather, and the sudden rush of heat and humidity made her grimace. God, she missed snow, even after all these years. I'll have fun when the show starts, I'm sure.
Hey, Belle. Hope watched as the shrill girl snuggled in close by Liam and bumped fists, before offering it over to her.
It's lovely to see you, Belder,
Hope offered, before reaching out to bump fists. Looking around the hall, she studied the growing crowd, ignoring the curious glances cast their way.
This is a very impressive campus. Oh, thank you, ma'am. I was talking with Professor Pellavon while I was waiting. She and Professor Warwick are looking forward to seeing you, Belder replied, before nodding just behind her. We can meet them if you like. I already got your tickets. All right, lead on, Hope said, nearly shaking her head as Belder took Liam's hand and didn't quite bolt across the room with him in tow.
Soon enough, she was there, bumping fists with Warwick, as he stood surrounded by a throng of students. Surprisingly, Liam wasn't the only male there, and she moved close enough to Pellavon to hear without getting a crick in her neck looking up.
It's nice to see you again, Professor. Just call me Miv, please, she replied, canting her head obligingly. I'm so glad that you could join us today. Your school must be just as busy. Up until yesterday. The younger girls and boys, most of them go home for the break after exams, she explained, looking around.
The hall was far from full, but the feeling of the ebb and flow of families moving like a tide was already familiar.
Your academy is focused on girls only, I think. Yes, it is, Miv nodded, and made a show of looking around. I wish we could have boys too, but it's part of the original charter. Still, it does help keep the girls focused, I suppose. Trust me, I have boys, she breathed. There are days, really, there are days.
Now and then, even after all these years, there were times it felt strange to be off the Sorgo grounds, like a hermit crab without its shell. Hope shared a smile with the tall shul woman.
I do appreciate the invitation. Belder is... well, she's trying hard. This is their 4th date, isn't it?
Mavere asked uncertainly, as the pair stepped out of the small throng.
I think she's nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs.
Hope grinned in spite of herself.
Oh, goddess. I haven't heard that one in years.
I said it right then.
Perfectly,
Hope nodded.
I knew Professor Warwick was teaching comparative humanity, but I didn't think he'd go in for idioms.
Well, not much, Miv shrugged, blushing ever so slightly. I've grown quite close with him over this year. Sometimes he has to explain these things, and I'm amazed when he asks me about some things people say. I suppose you never think about expressions until someone asks you about them.
That's the truth, Hope nodded. It was 2 years before I learned what people meant by a Turok scratching with its back foot, much less Nyos's balls.
Oh, goddess.
Miv blinked, then grimaced. I never even thought about those. So, what's the agenda for this afternoon? She said, watching as Warwick waved his farewells and set off with one of the boys, while 3 of the girls settled in around them protectively. Reflexively, she kept an eye on Liam, but Belder was already showing him off. Girls around the room were eyeing him up like a steak dinner, but the witless girl had her hand around his waist and was staying close. Given the crowd, she didn't mind. Much.
The show is in 2 hours?
Yes. I could show you around before I have to go change.
Miv looked at the girls clustered around Liam and Aku in a defensive circle.
I expect you've seen school buildings, though. Would you like to get out of here and get something to eat? Berta will stay on her best behavior, I promise.
Could we? I didn't eat a thing this morning, Hope said, watching Liam a moment longer. And I know, she really is a nice girl. It just takes getting used to. My brother shows up and suddenly I'm an instant matriarch. So what's the... Hope glanced down as a vision in black and periwinkle slipped deftly in between them, and smiled up at her winsomely.
Why, good afternoon, ladies.
Oh, have you met Mr. Desie?
Ambling across the commons behind Desie and Professor Warwick, Vadim stayed close behind Mandi as she showed off the campus. As she pointed over to her dorm, she realized it was the first time she'd been able to do that with anyone. The retainers who drop her off and pick her up weren't family, and took no real interest beyond maintaining the facade of her cover story. This was different. The campus wasn't a palace, but it was her home, her place. Something she could show off as her own. The palace was one big monument built up over the centuries. Memories here were the things she'd made for herself, instead of footnotes in a history text. Vadim was interested, animatedly asking questions as she thought about it. Not first thoughts or even second thoughts, but as they walked she picked at the feeling.
The others get to do this with their families.
As she glanced down at Vadim, he caught her eye and smiled.
This is nice, he whispered,
before nodding towards Warwick. It wasn't hard to read his thoughts. Being escorted around by a man, even a human man, it just seemed so odd, but she had a date. Maybe that was it. Mandi? Warwick called back over his shoulder, breaking her reverie, and she was startled from her reverie.
Yes, sir?
Mel jumped like she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't, and smiled at Vadim nervously. I know you have to change for the choir, and I'm sorry to take some of your time with Vadim before the show. Warwick glanced over to Deshin, who seemed just as curious about what was going on. I needed to ask you and Desie something while we're away from Professor Pelavon, and there won't be time after the show.
Sure.
The thing is, on the break, I'm going to ask Mavere and her Kobli Hebrin to marry me. I don't know how shul weddings go, but I was hoping Desie could be my best person, and you could give me away, Mel. I think that's wonderful, Vadim almost squeaked, and then cleared his throat, grinning. Congratulations. Give you away? I don't understand. Melondi blinked, while Desie grinned maniacally. Wait, you're going to ask her? Kellogg nearly tripped over her own feet and had to grab Desie's hand not to fall over. When did you start dating? How do you... can we come, please?
It's all sort of a human thing. Where I grew up, there's a best man or a bridesmaid, and a father or family walks a bride down the aisle. I guess I'll sort of wear both hats, maybe. It's a little confusing, and I don't know if they'll say yes, but I think they will. Tom glanced over to Desie and grinned as they reached the library doors. So, I wondered if you'd be my best person, Desie. And Melondi, I wondered if you'd give me away.
You mean, like being your matriarch?
Melondi blushed. Young or old, it's traditional for humans to have both people there. I like them to be the two of you. Aku was feeling better by the moment. The twins had closed ranks to either side of him, but to his vast relief they weren't getting handsy, and he relaxed into the spirit of things. The pair blushed furiously as he entwined his hands around theirs, but they were getting envious looks from the girls around the room. It certainly didn't hurt to show that he was very taken for the afternoon, and Kamara wasn't even stammering now. This would be a wonderful day. With their friends around, the sisters introduced him to Belda and her boyfriend. Aku peered discreetly up at the human. Warwick was tall, but this was just ridiculous.
Are you a musician as well? He asked uncertainly.
No, I just have happy feet, Liam said mischievously. Shockingly, Belda actually cuffed him lightly on the arm, but Liam only grinned at her before looking back at him sheepishly. That means I like to dance.
Oh.
Aku digested that a bit, thinking about the videos he's seen over the last week. His new hero sang like a cliff singer, and the poses he struck around the stage were important. Even if it was all so different, presentation was vital. Still, he hadn't even thought about dancing.
I'd love to hear more about that, if these wonderful ladies don't mind, he said, looking soulfully at Mara and Lynn before batting his eyes once at Belda and her friend Sephir. Of course, they melted, and Aku managed to wink at Liam ever so discreetly. I suppose. My sister is even letting me off my leash, Liam grinned, and snuck a glance at Belda before casting a friendly glance at Sephir at his right with a friendly shrug. Belle says they have a pretty good music collection at the library if you're interested. The others only have a few minutes head start. Why, Mr. Klassen, great minds do think alike. Aku squeezed the twins' hands, drawing a quiet squeak from Caslin. Ladies, I'm sure you'll see us safely there through this awful crowd, won't you? A gentle tug wasn't even needed, as he set the pace at a leisurely stroll. It wouldn't hurt to let the twins show him off. They were being such good hosts. As the girls started shepherding them towards the exit, he craned up to smile at Liam. This could be the start of a beautiful friendship. So, tell me more about Earth. Objective is on our way over to the library. Sergeant Diani poked at the controls from the right station, while Yala sat at the rear console taking a break. Copy. We have civilians coming, so it's going to get busy. A few more hours and we all get a break. Captain Biona looked up at the monitor and pulled the campus up on the main screen. The library's closed today. Dispatch one of the ground team and let's run a perimeter check. Sergeant Arena from Pod 2 is nearest, Captain. Fine. Yala, put Arena's body cam on screen 2. Goddess, a few days out of this bunker would be nice. Diani nodded as she reached for the comms. Control to Pod 1, status check. Around the room, dozens of small screens gave rotating views of the campus. Bent to their tasks, none of Pod 5 noticed, as the library cameras began to loop on empty rooms.
The portly librarian had been at the wrong place at the wrong time, and insisted the library was closed to visitors, but she still allowed O'Reilly inside to use the bathroom. Surprising her on the way back out, O'Reilly's first blow with the butt of the pistol hadn't left more than a trace of blood, and she managed to drag the body inside the empty bathroom. The sickening crunch of bone beneath her second blow had been worse, but she had the presence of mind to stay clean and left the woman inside, her breath shallow and unsteady. If the librarian wasn't dead, she'd have to take care of it on her way out, but with only 9 shells in the pistol, there were none to waste. Not yet. She felt nauseated by the violent ordeal, but she'd known there would be casualties. The reality was both better and worse than the weeks of anticipation, and her breath was rapid as she fought off the urge to vomit. Still, she controlled her panic. Therapy hadn't cured her fear of the dark after being buried alive, but it had taught her ways to cope, and she brought herself under control as she worked deeper through the labyrinth of stacks, past offices and study rooms toward her destination. Whoever wanted this done had provided everything. There had been floor plans for the library, and even projections of where Warwick was likely to go, between storage and the exhibit full of his wretched artifacts. Her last message said he would be heading there to pick something up. There was a short hall of study rooms before the gallery corridor, and she stepped inside, cracking the door to watch the corridor. The room's light was off, and it was dark. So dark. She fought to control her breath again when she heard voices. Saw them pass by toward the gallery. It was Warwick and 3 girls and a boy? Her target. She had to fight for control. 2 of the girls looked identical, and no one had mentioned a boy. Maybe she could just leave. Warwick was inside his gallery with the others. Minutes crawled by. She could still get out of this. There was blood on her hands, but the thick gloves she'd been ordered to wear would be easy to discard. She could walk out right now, and as long as the promise about the surveillance held true, this would never come back to her. She could go right now, or wait until Warwick and the others left, leave the building empty just in case they came out. But no. Her sponsor for all of this knew everything. The people who'd given her this chance had all the assets to put this together. There was the woman in the bathroom. She was committed, now. All or nothing. The consequences if she didn't follow through. No. She'd earned this chance to prove herself. Watching the corridor, her mouth was dry. Warwick was already there, opening up the gallery doors, and he was in a uniform. One of those damned human uniforms, mocking her. She stepped outside the study room, checked the pistol in her hands, and... "Excuse me, ma'am?" Teju nearly jumped out of her skin at the voice a few feet behind her. She wheeled around and fired without thinking. Once, twice. The primitive pistol kicked twice and the woman twisted. Blood sprayed into the corridor as the janitor dropped to the floor. "Holy fuck!" Diani yelled before her training took over. "Woman down! Woman down!" "Shit! Diani! Scramble all ground teams with trauma gear." Biona had already slapped the alarm and was dialing up the room cams. "What the... The picture's frozen! Brother, fuck! Yala, get pod 4 and 6 out there! Now, goddess damn it!" "On it, Captain!" Yala said frantically. "Pod 4 and 6 scramble. Active shooter. I repeat, we have an active shooter. Trauma gear needed at the library ASAP. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." While the view tilted toward the floor, images from the body cam were still coming over screen 2. Down the hall, the objective, their princess and her friends, were being pushed inside the gallery by Warwick. Long moments passed before a pair of boots walked past the body cam. Biona watched helplessly as she reached for the phone, listening as Diani and Yala relayed orders over the comm. "Yala, as soon as you can, check the ground footage. I want to know who the fuck is in there with them." Biona was listening as her pulse started coordinating the response, her eyes on the map and the footage of screen 2. The comm in her hand rang once, twice. "Professor Davari here. Hello. the voice sang out cheerfully. Agent, this is P51. Actual. We have an active shooter near the objective. P22 is down. All teams are scrambling. A moment might have passed before the voice calmly replied, I see. Ladies, excuse me, but I have to take this call. Biona gripped the comm tighter, feeling a sixth sense of urgency fighting against Duvare's unshakable calm. Goddess, this bitch has ice in her veins.
Right then. Yes, thank you. Enjoy the show, yes.
Duvare's voice sang to whoever was nearby, before the clip response came sharply over the line. Location. Library, second floor. We still have body cam footage from P22, but the internal video is frozen. Keep this line open, I'm on my way there. Duvare was puffing, and Biona glanced up at the screen to the map. Across the campus, 5 blue dots were already converging on the gold dot marking the objective, while the 3 girls on night watch were showing signs of movement. Up on screen 1, the purple dot of Agent Duvare was sprinting for the library.